Citizen Kane that was also a gangster film.
I have had the weirdest couple of weeks of film viewing here.
Interesting. Well, I get to talk about 2 Marvel movies, so this is going to be... John has giant diatribes about Hollywood because Marvel allows me to do that.
That's what we come here for.
Well, I love putting on my tweed jacket and smoking my pipe and saying that the masses' entertainment is rubbish.
Okay.
That does not make you look out of touch at all.
Well, it's kind of what we do here. We just put on tweed jackets and say, "Oh, why do the masses enjoy this material?"
But I don't have a tweed jacket, so it can't.
No, it's a proverbial tweed jacket.
Well,
we all wear one.
Well, let's not deny our listeners the opportunity for that any longer. Welcome back to the Hack Fraud Show, everybody. We have returned once more to grace your internet with our tweed jacketed opinions.
And to bring you very passionate segues.
Yes, always.
With the hopes that you don't get fleeced by what you hear.
Indeed.
No more jacket quotes. No more jacket stuff.
Moving on from that. This week, we are looking at the work of a filmmaker named Steven Soderbergh.
Yes.
One who has had one of the most bizarre careers in film history, I think it's fair to say.
He's done everything.
He's done a bit of everything, yeah.
I think he's done everything, including himself.
He's done everything except direct a superhero movie, although I guess you could argue that Ocean's 11 is its own kind of superhero movie in a way. But
yeah, that sounds about. I mean, like I was almost surprised by how neatly Ocean's 11 fits into the blockbuster mold. But that's okay.
That's okay. Yes, we will be talking about that film, the 2001 remake of Ocean's 11, as well as one of Soderbergh's slightly weirder, slightly earlier works. That would be 1999's The Limey.
If you ever read like one of those like big broad like film textbooks and you get a section that talks about editing, they will talk about the Limey at some point.
For good reason.
Yes.
Which I'm sure we will.
I'll save my breath. Okay.
Fascinating editing.
Yes, we will elucidate that in due course, but we've been off for a week, so we've got an awful lot of things to talk about here, or at least I do. So, guys, what you been watching?
Me first.
Ooh.
It's easy, because I've been too busy to consume. I'm sorry. I felt the father way.
You had me all excited there for a second. I thought you actually watched something.
It's okay.
John, what have you seen then?
Do you want me to start with the Russian film inspired by Citizen Kane or my long-winded discussions about Marvel and Hollywood?
Run down the Russian film real quick before we get into this.
This is a 2002 Russian film called Tycoon.
Uh-huh.
It starts off with... And when I say inspired by Citizen Kane, it's mostly in the structure. It's about, like, giant tycoon dies... And we learn about his life and his attributes based on the people around him. But it's also a gangster film, and it leans far more into corruption than Kane ever does. Like, the yellow journalism and populism stuff is kind of on the down low in Kane.
Uh-huh.
Whereas in this, it is pretty direct. It's also... Though I mean, like comparing it to Kane is like comparing like a beautiful piece of steak to like a McDonald's burger, but that's beyond the point. I really feel I don't believe it should be compared to the Kane, though the people who made it probably want it to be.
Uh-huh.
But it's what it ultimately turns out to be is a movie that kind of documents perestroika in the 80s, the sort of chaos of the 90s, and then some of the sort of crackdown of the 2000s in a really strange, sort of overly complex gangster style. Like, there's a point where there's the titular tycoon named Plato, and at one point he gets involved with a man who fought in Afghanistan who drives a bulletproof car and has innumerable weapons and only wears camo jackets. And he is killed at one point by a gang that throws a kitten on his car, so he gets out and is distracted, and then they gun him down with AK-47s, but the kitten is fine, assumedly so they can use it again.
If it weren't for the kitten, then I'd say the kill was wasted.
Yeah, and I have, and even though I've watched this movie quite closely, I really have no fucking idea what happens at the end. Like once it veers off from the Kane format, like we found out, like this guy Plato who dies at the beginning, he's alive somehow, and like there's a whole bunch of like it's like imagine if Kane came back to life and had like really strange, pointless diatribes and scenes with like the other people in his life. Like imagine if he went back to see Joseph Cotton.
Wow,
and so forth. And it just gets really weird and convoluted, and I will say, like, all the actors in it are really charming and really distinct, though, like, I'd argue that, like, the stuff that are flashbacks is way more interesting because it's all about, like, them fleecing governmental agencies and, like, mob bosses and, like, climbing up the social ladder, whereas in, like, when you get to the present, it's all, like, terrible, terrible melodrama.
Uh-huh.
But it's an interesting watch. I'm not quite sure I'd recommend it. It also has the Kane thing of like we're going to rise up some like populist demagogue through the power of the press. It has more to say about that than Kane, but it's also dumber. I am glad I witnessed it.
Uh-huh.
It is both a document of a time period and also something itself trying to document something.
Right.
And you don't get to see that very often. I can't say I'd recommend it though.
Okay.
If like anything I'm saying makes like sounds entertaining or interesting, maybe you should take a look at it. But it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think did I see anything else? I tried to watch because I was just like really curious. I tried to watch some of Steven Soderbergh's Kafka.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Because, like, I was just fascinated by it. Like, I couldn't, like, I've made my own bullshit Kafka movie as, like, with no money. So I'm routinely fixated by Kafka, and I wanted to see what the fuck Steven Soderbergh wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
He makes an action movie out of it? And, like, Jeremy Irons is Kafka, and that makes no sense. And it's both too strange for its own good, yet also just like too conventional.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like how the man turning into a bug in the Metamorphosis should be as much of a symbol as this movie makes sense.
Yeah, this is a movie where like at one point like Jeremy Irons as Kafka describes the plot of the Metamorphosis as like, oh, I'm going to write a book about a man who wakes up as a bug, and that gets a laugh, and that's like a jokey joke, like, oh, what? That's silly, Kafka. But then later, a man wearing a Zorro mask blows up a restaurant. And there's also, like, a man who can't speak, who keeps beating up people. Like, I didn't finish it for many reasons, the quality of the movie being one of them. But I felt the need to talk about it because it's an interesting case of a filmmaker too American for the material he's given.
Uh-huh.
Because Kafka has many things, and I think entirely European is one of them. I think Orson, there's this beautiful, like, 3-hour interview with Orson Welles where he talks about the trial. Like, even if you don't like the trial, that's a gold mine if you're a film studies person. But he says, like, when you read Kafka, it's Eastern Europe, Eastern Europe, Eastern Europe. Yeah. And like when Welles made the trial, he said, like, I think he said he tried to go to, like, Yugoslavia or places like that. Like, he couldn't see, like, Kafka anywhere else. And to see this vision of Prague, and it's filmed like a 40s film noir, and like American actors are everywhere, and like some of them just don't fucking hide their American accents like at all. Like you have Jeremy Irons ironing it up, and like everyone else is just normal. So it's an experiment, all right. I think this is what the Vidiots see in The Good German.
Yeah.
Whereas the thing about it is, I think The Good German is like a successful experiment because Soderbergh understands the American film noir, whereas I'm not quite sure he understands Kafka outside of like some like pop culture notions of it. Yeah.
Well, fun fact: this movie was written by Lem Dobbs, who also wrote the Limey. So there's some interesting synchronicity there.
A horrible mismatch. But Kafka, I've yet to see anything like it.
Well,
I am not like saddened by the fact that I watched it.
okay.
Or at least some. And I'm not going to try and give like a concrete opinion of it.
Okay.
Do you want me to talk about the movie I saw yesterday or Thor Ragnarok?
Start with Thor Ragnarok, I think.
Thor Ragnarok. Okay, this is a movie about Thor, and he starts off in like an underworld that's terrible in CGI, and he fights a bunch of fire dogs with the hammer, and then he goes to Valhalla, or no, it's not Valhalla. What?
Asgard.
Asgard, yeah, which kind of looks like if you put like Greek mythology into like a CGI blender. Like, there's nothing Norse about it at all. Well, of course, like, we watched this with Alex, who would, like, routinely say, that isn't Norse at all. What the fuck are you doing? Mm-hmm. And that was sometimes delightful. But then there's some shit with Loki. Doctor Strange shows up.
For 5 minutes.
For 5 minutes. I'm just going to say, Benedict Cumberbatch's American accent is terrible. It sounds so weird.
I'm surprised they haven't, like, let him ditch that accent yet.
I have no idea why they just stand like, oh, London doctor, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why that couldn't just fly.
I don't know either.
I don't know. But then, Thor... No, there's this, like, woman who invades Asgard in a bunch of terrible CGI, terribly choreographed fights. And then Thor goes to a trash planet. Hulk's there. Then I'm so bored. Okay. Now, I think kind of my problems with this movie can be summed up in the trash planet, because you said you liked the trash planet.
I did.
And I like the idea of the trash planet, but I said this over the group chat. The trash planet seems like the sort of thing that, like, oh god, what's how do you pronounce the director's name again?
Taika Waititi.
It seemed like Waititi had this idea for like this like world built like this like world that's like is a trash dump for everything. And there's this city that kind of was built up by trash and things found, and it's kind of grimy and grudgy, but it's got a lot of charm and it's really lived in. Mm. But then like somebody came along, maybe it was a co-writer, maybe it was like studio notes, I'll never fucking know because I don't care. And they just went in and just like sanded down like all the edges off of that. So you have this trash planet, but this like glistening, super clean like arena city in the middle of everything. And, like, it seems like all the costuming is like, hey, we got this shit from, like, some Guardians movies we've never made. Like, can we just use that? Okay, yeah, that'll do. And, like, it seems to have no coherent style other than, like, Technicolor, which is, like, I think it must be known that, like, the Guardians movies look great, not because they're, like, really colorful and creative, but also because, like, James Gunn is an actual fucking filmmaker. Because, like, this movie's default for filming everything is, like, bland, medium wides. Mm. And there's also just, like, some bewildering editing, because, like, all blockbusters have bewildering editing nowadays. Except for, actually, Black Panther didn't have that bad of editing. But I think there's something to be said about, like, this movie is just nothing. It's just, like, even by, like, the standard of, like, these kind of, like ragamuff thrown to the side Marvel movies, it is like an utter lightweight. Like things that might have consequences are resolved in a second. Things that like should feel like they have consequences don't feel like nothing. I don't know how like they made Hulk fighting a giant dog in what is essentially Marvel Valhalla. I don't know how you make that boring. Actually, part of it's probably just like shitty CGI, and good God, the CGI is terrible.
Yeah, it's really not good. I mean, part of me wants to defend this movie because it, compared to a lot of stuff that Marvel puts out, I thought it was like relatively charming and fun. Although
I'll get to some of that.
I'm now realizing that I'm struggling to remember anything that happens in this movie.
I'm struggling to remember things now. Like, okay, things I like about it. One, I like that Hulk's just there, and, like, the most they say about it is that, like, hey, he's just here now.
Yeah.
And he has to go back. Love that. I love how there's a cult of personality around Hulk, and there's a little Hulk party in the streets where they make papier-mâché Mark Ruffalo as Hulk masks.
Yeah.
That's it. That's great. Mark Ruffalo. I don't know who does, like, the motion capture stuff. If it is it Mark Ruffalo who does, like, the motion capture Hulk stuff?
I think it is. I think he does.
Okay, because if it is, that's a fun, stupid performance where he's chomping on giant pears and running around in a towel and having baby fits. That's fun.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum is Jeff Goldblum, and I'll take what I can get. I get the feeling that, like, they wanted to paint his face up and they wanted to have something really intricate, and then he said, like, look, man, it's a Marvel movie. One stripe. That's all you're getting. I'm here on set. I'm going to sit on the throne. I like the climax when, like, fucking when Immigrant Song, like, starts blaring and it turns into, like, Technicolor CGI nonsense, but it's fun Technicolor CGI nonsense.
Yeah. On
the Rainbow Road, I'm kind of like, okay, I can get behind this. And it's not the least funny Marvel movie I've seen. I must say, like, of the three of us, I think we laughed maybe once at the movie's jokes. Yeah, I'm not, like, as far as, I mean, like, compared to Civil War, this is, like, some, like, renegade masterpiece, but
yeah.
I think, like, it kind of feels like them picking up the pieces of, like, what was successful about Guardians and kind of going, like, hey, this can work if we just shove it onto a director that kind of has a similar style, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I haven't seen any of Taika Waititi's other movies. From what I gather, they're quite good. I think Hunt for the Wilder People got a lot of praise, and I've been meaning to watch that.
Hunt for the Wilder People got a lot of praise. What else did he make?
He made this mockumentary about vampires called What We Do in the Shadows. Yeah.
Yeah, those seem really interesting. So yeah. I'm not like down on him as a director, because both of those projects seem really interesting. I should probably see them. But Thor Ragnarok, it's just nothing.
Yeah, it's like, kind of fine.
I'm not angry at it. Like, as far as, like, these Marvel things go, I can't really be angry at any of them.
Yeah. I think the defining feature, like, of our criticism of these movies is that we refuse to grade them on a curve. And, like,
yeah,
most of society seems to have, like, what's the word? Like,
seems to just kind of take them as part of this, like, grand arc, it seems.
They most of society seems to have made their peace with, like, grading these movies on a curve, and that's just something I refuse to do, because I think they should be treated as real movies.
Because it's like it's the television show in its 8th season, and, like, why should I care at this point? Like,
yeah.
like there's the post-credit scene where the giant ship rises, and I'm like, why should I care about this? I mean, first of all, it's not even a very good, like, television show to begin with, because but the continuity's bullshit, and Civil War, the supposed, like, great monumentous movie, ultimately meant nothing.
Yeah.
But it also is kind of a movie that, like Mark Ruffalo starts remembering Avengers 2, and I'm like, oh wait, that movie happened. I hate to see it.
Oof, that movie was not
rough. Not good. It looks better now.
Well, sort of. Anyway.
Well, I mean, not Civil War exists, but speaking of Civil War, Black Panther. Let's kind of get it out of the way. CGI is awful. I don't know how they're getting away with it.
It is shocking. It is shocking how bad the CGI in these movies is.
I don't know. I don't know why people are grading these things on a curve.
Yeah.
And, like, is it? I think it's kind of like a silent defeatism along critics who have to watch everything, and they go, like, I've seen, like, every DC movie, and I know the pain that, like, those things can cause.
Yeah.
So I'm just alright with a movie that, like, just fucking tries to be entertaining.
Yeah, and I guess, like, the Marvel movies at least, like, are competent in terms of, like, the way they're constructed for the most part. Not entirely.
Yeah,
but
sometimes. Sometimes they are just as bewilderingly incompetent. Like, I think Civil War is just a train wreck.
Civil War is a goddamn, like, abomination, and I don't know how that movie got half the praise it got, but that's not important.
Black Panther. Now, I came into this movie expecting something that was just kind of like, standard American Marvel blockbuster wearing the skin of Afrofuturism.
Uh-huh.
And there is more Africa in this than I anticipated. Like,
Yeah.
they bring up colonialism. They bring up, like, fight for resources. They bring up tribes. Like, one of the big things of the movie is, like, this tribe that's gone rogue, and it's just kind of, and they, every time there's a new king, they come up and say, we're gonna rule this time, and then they bitch slap them away. I love the little bit where, because, Michael B, it's Michael B. Jordan, correct?
Yes, Michael B. Jordan.
Michael B. Jordan, great in the movie.
Yes.
I love how, like, his big thing is, like, Pan-Africanism, like, oppressed blacks of the world unite.
Yeah.
And the Wakandans, like, the actual Africans are saying, wait, what are you talking about?
Right.
Because, like, Africa is one of the most diverse places in the world, and Pan-Africanism is really weird for a lot of them. And also, like, this movie looks pretty good.
Yeah.
This movie's got some, like, I mean, like, when the CGI comes, it's awful. But, like, this movie, there's a pretty decent action scene in Korea.
I like that action scene a lot.
I like that action scene. And the music, I really like it. It's so different. It's so weird. I'm just like, because like, so many of these things just have, like, the Marvel score in a can.
Yeah.
So to have, like, fucking Kendrick Lamar come in,
Right.
breath of fucking fresh air, and it also I think it's half the reason why the Korea fight is as interesting as it is.
Yeah. With the song, I love all of that.
Yeah, it's like a combination of, like, African drums and, like, a pounding hip hop beat. It's like almost hypnotizing. It kind of says, like, hey, countries shut in from the world, we need to, like, spread ourselves. And it addresses the fact that Wakanda is nonsense and shouldn't exist. That being said, I like Martin Freeman, and I like the sister Q.
Oh, she's great.
She's great. Hello, colonizer.
I want only good things for that actress going forward.
Oh, so do I. Hell, everything's great. God, who's the actor from Get Out?
Oh, Daniel Kaluuya, yeah.
Great. He just has a great face for, like, facial reactions.
Yeah.
He's got, like, these massive eyes.
I saw him on the Oscars last night. He was just sitting there looking like the coolest motherfucker alive. Like, he just...
Because he is the coolest motherfucker alive right now. I'd argue the weakest part of the movie is, first of all, anytime it, like, cuts the Civil War.
Well, yeah.
Anytime it cuts the Civil War. Anytime it shows Claw, that abomination from Avengers 2.
Well, I do kind of like Andy Serkis in this movie, because they just let him, like, chew all the scenery and then get rid of him.
He's much better than he's been in any other of these movies.
Yeah.
But, like, I'd argue Black Panther is one of the weakest links.
Yes, no, I agree. He is oddly, like, the
such,
weakest
like,
character.
blank face, like, protagonist on a mission guided entirely by other people's whims, it seems.
Yeah.
And also, like, the climax goes on way too fucking long. This thing's, like, 2 hours 15, and it should be, like, 2 hours tops.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that.
Also, I don't think it's very good Afrofuturism.
Well, I can't really speak to that, but...
Like, here's the thing about it, is that, like, when we're just, like, on the streets, and it's, like, actual tactile world, and it's people walking around in kind of, like very, like, modernistic African traditional dress, that's all really cool. But, like, the moment they show, like, some giant CGI wide shot, and it's just kind of, like, bland CGI futurism, but it just kind of happens to look like one of those, like, castles the Mali Empire built, that's terrible. So bad.
Well...
But this is also a movie about a man who obtains the throne via a combination of divine right and violence, and keeps the throne via a coup d'etat against a usurper to the throne after the Imperial Guard revolts.
Yeah.
And I think the movie, in a time where we're watching the American experiment slowly die, I think the movie should analyze that a bit more.
It is a little strange, but
yeah.
I do think what is there is pretty good as far as how it delves into that.
There's a lot more to this than I expected.
Yeah.
And I found myself enjoying it a lot more. Though, like, I think Martin Freeman, of all people, I love this line, like, hey, I kept secret that the king of a third world country is running around in a metallic cat suit. And I'm kind of like, yeah, movie doesn't really explain this very well, but maybe it doesn't have to. Like, I kind of like just how, like, isolated it's in its own world, it seems to be.
Yeah.
And also, I love that there's a villain in a $200 million Disney Marvel blockbuster whose motive is getting revenge for colonization. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
And he literally this is a movie that has an African American stealing from the British Museum. and I will get behind that in any context.
Well, yes, because the British Museum is basically an active crime scene.
It's an active fucking crime scene. But so yeah, Black Panther, I like it.
Yeah. I like it too. I support it.
I wish Ryan Coogler was guiding this giant, like, Marvel fuck machine instead of the people behind Arrested Development.
Yeah, but, you know.
But,
there it is.
What else has Ryan Coogler made?
He made Creed, which was pretty good.
People really like Creed.
Yeah, Creed was good. And then his first movie was Fruitvale Station.
Fruitvale Station. I want to see Fruitvale Station at some point.
Yeah, I need to watch that. I've been meaning to watch that for ages.
Maybe we can do like a Ryan Coogler week sometime down the road.
I might be open to that.
But yeah, giant Marvel blockbuster that wears Africanism on its sleeve, and this is a better movie than Wonder Woman. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree.
I'm glad that the Black community has sort of taken this in, and it kind of became the movement that it did. I wish it was going to a better company, but what can you do?
Yeah,
I think Movie Bod did a great video summarizing this about like things we love being sponsored by things we don't like.
Well, you know, if the most popular franchise out right now is, you know, using its platform for things like this, I think that's something I can get behind. And
donating money to STEM research.
Oh yeah.
Maybe somebody at the Evil Empire has a heart. I never thought I'd be this positive about this movie.
Huzzah.
But regardless, Tyler.
Yes.
I've wasted enough time.
Okay, I may push some of these. I'll try to run this down quickly. I saw the new film by Alex Garland, director of Ex Machina. The movie is Annihilation. I wish I had better things to say about it. Yeah, it was not good. It was really not good. It's unfortunate because Ex Machina, I really liked it. I know you guys did too. I think that's a movie that's gonna...
Ex Machina is a great little science fiction vehicle. That's like really small in scale, but yet still feels huge.
Yeah. Annihilation, they tried to make huge, and it doesn't go very well. Part of the problem is that the dialogue is terrible, and just the performances...
And I assume there isn't an Oscar Isaac to guide you through.
Well, Oscar Isaac is in it, but he's not... He doesn't loom very large, like, in the story. He's, like, not in the movie very much, and his character is kind of weird. And at least two of the roles are very miscast. Jennifer Jason Leigh, who I love, she is not... I don't know what happened there. I think that either the direction was just off, or this role was just not right for her. She love her. Her performance in this movie is really not so good. Also, Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin, who I also love and support. I don't think was right for the role that they put her in either. But also, again, doesn't help that the dialogue is not good at all.
Well, I remember seeing the trailer, and I'm like...
Yeah, well, because it was such a weird roller coaster I was on with this movie, because the trailer was terrible, and then there was some crazy, like, behind-the-scenes turmoil. I don't know if you heard about this.
I haven't heard of the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, like, the test screenings didn't go well. Paramount sold off the international rights to Netflix. But Scott Rudin had final cut, so he's stuck behind Garland. But then the reviews started coming out, and the reviews were really good. There was some good buzz building around it. And then I went and saw it and just, like, the movie is not about anything. Like,
that's the greatest criticism you can say.
Yeah, like, I think walking out of it, I was like, this movie and this story, it's really, really dumb. And they tried to, like, dress it up and make it seem like it was smart. And that just did not work at all.
I know it comes, like, this is, like, in, like, an adapted screenplay or something.
Well,
I don't know.
It was based on a book, but I heard, like, pretty loosely. Also, like, the title apparently is much more thematically appropriate to the book. Honestly, I don't know why he kept the title. And the climax is one of the most bizarre and stupid things I think I've ever seen in a movie. And there is...
This kind of sounds like the Revenant thing, where it's like stupid script, but the people making it think it's really important.
It's not even that. They throw in a lot of, like, grand talk and, like, thematic stuff, and, like, I don't know. There is some good stuff in it. Like, but I think if it just, like, leaned into its trappings as, like, a fun, goofy genre piece more, it would be a lot better. Like, there's a great, like, horror scene in the middle of the movie, which is genuinely, like, heart-beatingly terrifying. And I just think if there were more of that and less, like, highfalutin talk about genetics and the nature of the human mind, this movie would be a lot better. So
this is starting to sound like Prometheus now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't hate Prometheus. So
Well, I don't know.
This sounds like the kind of, like, interesting failure I might, like, adopt and try to defend.
Oh, I want you to see it, because I would love to know what your thoughts on it are going to be.
Yeah.
I just, like, and the entire theater, like, you could tell, had, like, the same vibe. Like, once it ended, like, everyone just immediately got up and left. Like, it was some rough stuff. And,
I love it when, like, a theater is all on the same page against a movie.
Yeah, man, I just don't know. So, I'm sorry to report that it's not better, but, you know, see it.
Yeah, but, like, also, the trailers kind of look terrible, and I wasn't expecting greatness either.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just the critical
honestly,
response to
someone
this.
should make a movie out of just the backstory of it.
Yeah, I don't know. The critical response to this just baffled me. Anyway, I also saw a Western that was Marlon Brando's only directorial effort. It's called One-Eyed Jacks.
One-Eyed Jacks?
Yeah.
Let me pull this up.
It is a weird little movie. It looks really good. The colors of it they just pop. I was fortunate enough to see, like, a DCP of this in my class. It was like the 4K restoration that Criterion just did last year.
Yeah, you don't always get that.
Yeah, it looked great. Marlon Brando plays the lead, and then you also have Carl Malden as kind of his, like, partner in crime who becomes his adversary. There's a lot of, like, weird, like, kind of leisurely paced scenes and sequences. It just kind of moves free-flowing from one thing to the next. I didn't love it. A lot of it was kind of boring, but there are some really compelling scenes in it. There's a scene where Brando and Carl Malden meet up for the first time, like, after Brando's been in jail for, like, 5 years because Carl Malden left him behind after a robbery earlier. You see that at the beginning of the movie. That scene is wonderful. It's rich. It's super tense. It's really well staged. It's odd and it's interesting. Again, like, I didn't love it, but it was certainly a fascinating experience. Like, Brando as a director is just so fascinating to grapple with. And the character is something that it's the type of character that he wasn't necessarily playing a lot around this time. Kind of a weird, like, tragic romantic figure in a way. And I don't know, it's an interesting movie, and the behind the scenes saga of it is equally interesting. It was
I'm just looking at this, like, apparently Rod Serling and Sam Peckinpah are uncredited. It was supposed to be directed by Stanley Kubrick of all people.
Yep. And, like, the studio, like, recut some of it, and, like, there was all kinds of crazy stuff that happened. But as it stands, it is a fascinating document, and really unlike any other Western I've ever seen, certainly.
This is another movie whose backstory should be made into its own movie.
Yes. I watched Martin Scorsese's Casino.
Ooh, what'd you think?
It's fine. You know, it's kind of a it's got all that great Scorsese spirit and filmmaking, verve, but yeah, I think most people agree that it's kind of just Goodfellas in Vegas. And
I think it's a little bit more than Goodfellas in Vegas. I think there is some interesting things about the casinos and how they operate.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
There's some messing with the law you don't really see in Goodfellas because it's all about like them as criminals purely.
Right. Yeah.
But, it's Goodfellas in Vegas.
Yeah,
That's,
the stuff about like the ins and outs and the workings of the casinos are really interesting. I think the relationship between Robert De Niro's character and Sharon Stone's character is a fascinating relationship.
Yes.
She gives a great performance. On the whole, I think it's kind of a minor work, but it's Scorsese doing Scorsese, and I would never argue against that.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold it up as as a Scorsese masterpiece, but I do think it's like a thoroughly fascinating work.
Yeah. Let's see what else here. I think I'll wrap this up and save some of these for next week. But I rewatched a couple of movies that we did in the early days of this podcast.
Oh, interesting. Ooh.
Just kind of by circumstance, but I rewatched Mean Streets, another Scorsese joint, and Charlie Kaufman's Anomalisa.
Oh, interesting. The podcast was the last time I've seen Anomalisa.
Yeah, that time when we watched it, I think was the last time I had viewed it as well. And, suffice it to say, my personal experience and my kind of frame of mind has shifted a lot since we did that episode. And
yeah, mine as well.
I think it's fascinating to watch that movie now, like, having moved past all that. And this movie I just think is a masterpiece. It captures the mindset of depression perfectly, while at the same time presenting this like unique case of a guy who maybe is like, this time watching it I was like he seems to have some like more unique mental illness than maybe I had picked up on.
There is something like deeply morose about this movie in like a really unique way, and the presentation of it just like really sells it. It's a really like unique presentation for this kind of illness as well. I've been kind of meaning to rewatch that now that I'm like in this stage of my life and sort of like see how I react to it. I'm curious like whether I'd have the same reaction to it as I did then.
Yeah, there was a lot more about it that I appreciated this time around.
Okay.
And then the same I would say for Mean Streets, actually. I liked it a lot more. I remembered, like, not loving it. I think that was partially because I had kind of expected, like, Scorsese to arrive, like, more fully formed than he kind of does in this movie.
You expected Taxi Driver, and you got something else.
Yeah, but, with that kind of expectation baggage out of the way, I was able to, like, really appreciate it for kind of the more low-key, like, character-focused document of a time and a place that it is. And I don't know, I found a lot more to appreciate in it this time around, and I think it's a movie that I'm going to come back to quite a bit.
Yeah. I remember like my thoughts of it back then being that like it's a really fascinating time capsule for Little Italy.
Yeah.
And for a filmmaker that would never return to that mold. I should probably like rewatch this. I should probably just go through all of like the Scorsese catalog at some point because I haven't returned to him in a while. Outside of like when we did the little Abomination Scorsese week.
Also, fun fact about this movie, which I'm not sure I knew the first time I watched it, they only shot in New York for like a week. Most of it, the interiors and stuff were shot in LA, but like the stuff they shot on the streets of New York is just so effective at capturing that atmosphere that it kind of hangs over the whole movie.
Oh yeah, like no one shoots Little Italy like Scorsese.
Yeah.
I think it also makes me know like he grew up in Little Italy. Yeah, he probably knew all of that by the back of his hand.
Oh, I'm sure he did. So that's Mean Streets, and that is what I have been watching for this week.
Are we ready, guys?
All right, so let's dive into Steven Soderbergh here. Again, just the most bizarre career. He has done crazy experimental films, just straight ahead, like blockbuster thrillers, the Ocean's trilogy. He's done
like quasi Coen Brothers films.
Yeah, he competed against himself for the Academy Award for Best Director in 2000. Did you know this? He was nominated for Traffic and Aaron Brockovich, and he won for Traffic. So and let's not forget, he made a 2-part, 4.5-hour biopic of the Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara, which, you know, who else would do such a thing?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know what's in this man's head. When you watch like some filmmakers, like especially those with like a really unique autorial vision, like a Wes Anderson or a Scorsese, you can kind of get a feeling for their thought process and like maybe like their like philosophy is. With Soderbergh, you're just kind of like, all right, roll the dice. What is he going to give me now?
Yeah, and he is still the youngest filmmaker to receive the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which he won for his directorial debut, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which actually I forgot. I watched that today.
Okay.
That movie is great. That movie, it's an excellent, like, low budget, very intimate. There's only like 4 characters, really. They all feel like super well fleshed out. The performances are great. The subject matter is like kind of lurid, but he treats it in such a way that it doesn't really like come off in like a titillating way. It's just super focused. It's a great movie about just people and about people's relationships. I would encourage you both to watch that. That's a great movie.
I might look at it because like Soderbergh is always a figure that I'm fascinated by, and because he's made everything, I will return to him eventually.
But for this week, we watched Ocean's 11 and The Limey. Kind of a great like example of his kind of one for me, one for you philosophy, where he would like do a studio movie, do a more kind of auteur focused movie, trade them off back and forth to kind of have his career, have his cake and eat it too. What do we want to start with here?
One, I have considerably more to talk about. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure you know which one that is.
Yeah. So should we just do Ocean's 11 and get it out of the way?
Yeah, let's do Ocean's 11. Reed, which one did you see?
The one that had actually nothing to do with scurry. Well, because it's called The Limey. So, like, you think, like, oh, limey, like sailors. Like, fuck. All right, I'm going to go get tea. Bye.
Okay.
Okay, then. Well, at least he watched, like, the more substantive movie, if, like, we can put that sort of thing into it.
Yeah.
So, one real Reed chose wisely.
Ocean 11, starring pretty much anyone who would become a star in the 2000s.
Yeah, well, like, I love what's great about this kind of movie when it's done well.
Yeah.
Which this one is, I want to be clear. Oh, yeah. I did enjoy this movie quite a bit.
It's exactly what I expected, and I am more than okay with that.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of, like, super likable people all thrown together, just kind of doing what they do, being super charming, and...
Yeah, just throwing them together, like, we're not quite sure, like, we ascertain their backstories and their personalities purely by their interactions, which is the best way to do this sort of movie.
Yeah. You've got your George Clooney, you've got your Brad Pitt, you've got your Matt Damon, Julia Roberts, Don Cheadle, a bunch of other people, all just thrown together. The story of this movie basically is George Clooney plays Danny Ocean, fresh out of prison, freshly divorced from Julia Roberts' character. He decides to reconnect with his old friend Brad Pitt, get a crew together, and rob a casino, which in the world of this movie has never been done before. And
he just wants to get back at the guy who stole his ex-wife.
Yes, which is great.
And what follows is a machine of a movie where people who are impossibly good at their job do impossible things with impossible grace and impossible style, and it's impossibly fun to watch.
Yeah, no, this movie is ludicrously entertaining.
Oh yeah, it is, like, all the characters are wonderfully fun. It is snappy and quick in, like, a really satisfying way. It wastes no time with extraneous or sort of plot deliberation. Like, events come up, they react to it out on the spot. It has. I think we're going to talk about editing a lot with the Limey, but the editing in this is really interesting.
Oh yeah, it is super tight, and like the style of this movie is impeccable. Like, it just The lighting is great. It looks fantastic.
The music choices, the pace, like the sort of all the acting is almost old Hollywood like in a way.
Yeah, very much so. Like fittingly, as this was a remake of a Rat Pack movie from the 50s or 60s.
Yes.
Yeah, there's the editing. It just moves so fast from one thing to the next, just zipping by. Like if you blink, you will miss stuff in this movie.
Oh yeah. Like it's like boom, boom, bang, and like. You also have, I'm learning, is a Soderbergh fixture of the British man no one can understand.
Yeah.
And like words come out of his mouth a mile a minute. Oh god, I'm struggling to say other things about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super fun, like, diverting, studio movie. And, I can always get behind that. I think all too often we see versions of that are not done well at all. And to have a craftsman like Soderbergh doing this sort of thing is a refreshing change of pace.
I think it also must be known that like he made this movie again in like, of course there's like the other Ocean's movie, but he also just made it in the deep south of Logan Lucky.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much like this movie but with rednecks. and I'm not gonna say that movie's better, but like Logan Lucky I think has a little bit more to it.
Logan Lucky has a little bit more thematically going on, but
it's also just like less like well put together.
Yeah, it's less like perfectly crafted. It's less taut. One thing, although that movie shares with this, I think, is what they choose to reveal to you and when is superbly done. Like the whole bit with the SWAT team in this movie is I love all of that. But it's a super well crafted, like super fun piece of entertainment, and that's fine.
Yeah, like this movie is a breeze, and it's kind of not much to it, but I am completely fine with that because it is perfectly constructed and perfectly manicured to what it is.
Yeah.
And if more like I wish more studio movies were like this and weren't these like ponderous, like giant television programs.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And also, apparently, at least the first sequel, Ocean's 12, is kind of crazy. My roommate...
I haven't heard much about those movies.
Well, my roommate told me, apparently there's a scene in Ocean's 12 where Julia Roberts' character pretends to be Julia Roberts. Because apparently Julia Roberts exists in this universe. So... that might be something I have to watch at some point.
Interesting.
Because I think I might get a real kick out of that.
That sounds like must watch. But yeah, is this sort of like is this what was the George Clooney coming out party?
Well, how do you mean? Like in terms of like him
as like big bankable Hollywood
yeah. This was pretty much it. I mean, he'd been building up to this. Like he was on ER, which was a big hit on TV, and then he was in The Peacemaker, which was a disaster. He was in another Soderbergh movie, Out of Sight. That was the first movie they did together, and I think that did pretty well. And then this kind of like cemented him. I think this was his big...
I can't really think of Clooney in the 90s.
Yeah. He arrives fully formed in this movie, and it
just feels like he's been a star forever.
Yeah. No, he is one of my favorite people in Hollywood.
George Clooney is just one of those, like, he is one of the movie stars, and for good reason. He exudes old Hollywood charm pretty much like no one else.
Yeah.
And also has, like, a really interesting directorial career.
Oh, yeah.
Including the flop Suburbicon.
Oh, boy.
But he also made Good Night and Good Luck, and that's a great movie.
Yeah. So that is Ocean's 11. I would certainly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it.
Like if you're just looking for like a perfectly tuned like Hollywood blockbuster, this will do it.
Yeah, for sure.
And you also just get to see like, oh, so this is where all these people came from.
Yeah, but let's move on to 1999's The Limey, starring Terrence Stamp and some other people.
Ooh.
So, story of this movie, pretty simple. Basically, Terrence Stamp plays a British man who comes to Los Angeles after his daughter has died under somewhat suspicious circumstances. He wants revenge. He wants to find out what really happened.
He wants to kill the person who he thinks did it.
Yes. Peter Fonda is there as what's the guy's name? Terry Valentine.
Terry Valentine, yeah.
A kind of record executive who has dalliances with much younger women. Luis Guzman is there as his daughter's friend, who is kind of helping him out. Leslie Ann Warren plays his daughter's acting teacher.
Yeah. And at one point we see Terrence Stamp on, is it like a TV set, I think?
Either a TV set or a movie set, yeah, where she
like
is like...
Or maybe...
It's some kind of set, and it's so weird to see like a character as slimy as him there.
Yeah. I really liked this movie.
Interesting.
I did too.
I was underwhelmed by it.
Oh, really?
I was underwhelmed by it. I'll sort of get into why that is. Sort of explain to me, like, why do you really like it?
Reed.
Well, why did you like it, Tyler?
Well, I don't know. I thought it was, like, all the actors were super charming. The characters were great. A lot of, like, big, great personalities up there on the screen. It's, like, it's so, like, perfectly put together, I think. Like, the editing is kind of weird, and, like, they do a lot of with that, which we'll get into further here in a minute. But I just think it's a super, like, tautly constructed, like, revenge story. I love Terrence Stamp and his character so much.
Oh my god.
He is great. The way he, like, talks in, like, the Cockney rhyming slang is so perfect.
And everyone just walks around saying, what?
Yeah. Everyone's constantly unsure what he's talking about. The style of the movie I thought was great. It's, like, super, like, well shot and stylistically shot. The action sequences I thought are just brilliantly staged.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
I don't know. It's just, I loved, like, spending time with these characters as they embarked on their mission of revenge, and I thought the movie itself was just super well made and well put together, and I was really into it.
Okay. I find it kind of interesting because, like, of course, like, all the acting across the board is great. Like, Soderbergh has, like, a really great autorial eye. The editing of this movie is utterly fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yes.
I also think that it's edited that way because they saw what they had on the editing room floor and said, "Oh, this is nothing." Like, it's man shows up, wants to kill person, tracks them down, the end.
Well, yeah.
Almost.
I'm kind of struggling, really, what there is to this movie outside of, like, some fascinating technicals, and I also, but like, it doesn't have, like, this, like, the oiled machinery charm of an Ocean's.
Yeah, it's like rougher around the edges, and the editing again, like, he does this weird thing where, like, he'll start the audio or, like, flash forward to the next scene, like, before it starts.
And constantly cutting back to him on a plane.
Yeah, constantly cutting back to him on the plane, cutting around in time to, like, earlier things and later things, and just messing around with, like, voiceover and chronology and all that sort of stuff. The story still feels, like, pretty straightforward, but, like, the way they mess with it, maybe it's in kind of an empty, like, stylistic thing, but I appreciated it nonetheless.
I think I'm not entirely sure what they think that style does. And I'm not entirely sure how that, like, fucking around with, like, temporal spaces and sound really applies to what is a pretty straightforward revenge story. And I don't have a problem that it's a pretty straightforward revenge story. I'm just kind of struggling with, like, how these two things fit together. And, like, whether they've really thought about how they fit together.
Well, it's possible that they didn't, because, as we know, Soderbergh is a very experimental filmmaker, and he may have just been like, this is a fairly standard story. Maybe I kind of want to fuck around with this a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of my own origin stories, that they're like, oh, this isn't that. Hey, we got, like, a bunch of, like, B-roll of Terrence Stamp, like, smoking cigarettes and things like that. Like, why don't we, like, mess around with that and do things with that? And, like, if that's okay, that's fine. I'm just struggling, really, like, what to really make of this movie, to be honest.
I don't know that I really have an explanation for it. Like, I'm not totally sure that there is one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you like the style of a film, you like the style. Sometimes that is all you need.
I don't know. I just think it was an interesting way to do a movie like this. Like, I think Pulp Fiction really popularized the whole telling a story out of order thing around this time. And Soderbergh just does something really different with that kind of mindset, keeping you guessing as to, like, what's going on. And, like, maybe, honestly, I may have stumbled upon something here. I think maybe it kind of, like, works within, like, the story of him, like, putting the puzzle together, like, the puzzle of, like, the events of the movie, and, like, the way that the movie is constructed kind of reflects that in a way.
Okay.
You know, maybe that was what they intended, maybe not. I think it does kind of work in that regard.
I certainly like this movie more because of, like, its super interesting editing style. Like, it makes it far more of a puzzle than it would have been otherwise, and that makes it more of this thing that we kind of pull apart and discern. The issue is like, I just kind of don't care about all the pieces. Like Peter Fonda is, like, just about every, like, mob villain you've ever seen.
Oh,
like,
you didn't like him? I thought he gives a really good performance.
I mean, Peter Fonda is a charming dude. He is, like, but, like, he's not really much more than like a charming performance. It's really what I say. I'm talking about, like, the bones of it as a plot construction. There just really isn't much there.
Yeah.
So trying to build a puzzle box out of it didn't do all that much for me.
Yeah. Well, about his character, I would say you're probably right, but I did really also appreciate kind of the arc of Terrence Stamp in this movie.
Yeah. There's some, like, I adore the scene where, like, Terrence Stamp comes to the house, and, like, we just see over and over again, like, him thinking of ways to kill Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
And how it ruminates on that, and how like the sister's friend has to say, "Don't do it, man."
And just him kind of grappling with, like, who he was as a father, and you get all that archive footage, which was taken from a Ken Loach film. I can't remember what the name of it was. Yeah. Something cows. But they use that to kind of, like, flesh out, like, some flashback sequences. I just think
stuff's really interesting.
Yeah, all that stuff I really did appreciate. And I don't know, man. I just thought it was a super fun, entertaining piece of film, and I was really on board with it.
Yeah. I'm not trying to, like, dissuade you from enjoying it. I'm just kind of, like, trying to find in my frame, like, what I can make of it, and, like, really what there is to make of it.
Yeah.
And why I was mostly bored by it.
Reed, what do you have to say?
Terrence Stamp is really hamming it up on screen.
but I think in a really fun, like, charming.
Yes. There are some parts in it where it's a little, like, okay, it's a little out of left field, but I guess that helps explain, like, the mob asterisk mark when they get nabbed by DEA agents.
Yeah.
And the movie kind of takes, like, a pit stop, and, like, the car almost breaks down, but then you have Terrence Stamp, who's, you know, keep going at it, which...
Tell him I'm coming. Like, Terrence Stamp is a consistent, like, wonderful figure to guide through the movie.
Yeah.
Yes. I did like how at the ending, it's like, so you didn't kill my daughter. Oh, okay. Bye. Walks away. I like that. I like how it wasn't entirely cold-blooded.
Yeah, there's something there. I'm just not quite sure what, or neither am I sure the filmmakers know really what to make of that.
I guess I wouldn't say that this film is, like, an all-time classic or anything, but I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I was just pleasantly surprised by just, like, the style of it. I love that first...
There's a reason, like, people study this for editing, and they should study this.
Yeah. All that stuff I was really fascinated by. That first action scene where he goes, like, to the loading dock or whatever, and has that whole shootout. I loved that. I love the scene where they go to the party at Valentine's house. Just all the design and the location work in this movie I thought was spectacular.
Yeah, gorgeous movie.
Yeah.
Gorgeous movie.
It very much looked like a BoJack Horseman type of house with that balcony.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm even gonna say.
Yeah.
And then one other thing. Obviously, 90s. Where do you get a gun? Some kids on the street. That's how you do it. God damn it.
Just to kind of beat my own horn here for a second. That restaurant that Terrence Stamp and Leslie Ann Warren go to when they have lunch together, I have been there several times.
Oh, interesting.
It's a good place. Dinah's Family Restaurant. And I have also been to a house much like the as you say, BoJack Horseman type house up in the hills.
Yeah, well, that is the Hollywood Hills house. I think they say at one point, if you can afford it, you buy it.
Right, and that is the quintessential one of those, with a weirdly narrow balcony pool. So, yeah, the Limey.
It's interesting.
It is very interesting, and
it's disappointing because it doesn't make any references to sailing or scurvy, but I'll take it.
I think Limey is also just slang for a British person.
I'm certain like all that comes from is like Soderbergh spent like a month in England and was just like perplexed by the accents and decided to write it into characters.
Well, if nothing else, I mean, this is an interesting movie from one of our most interesting filmmakers, and this is a guy we're going to be coming back to a lot in the future. At least I am.
He experiments. He does strange things in filmic form. Sometimes they just don't fucking work, like with Kafka, but other times they are utterly mesmerizing.
Yeah. And, hey, go watch Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I cannot stress that enough.
I will do that. That sounds fascinating.
So, that wraps it up for this one. What are we going to do next time? When's 200 coming? Not 200, 100? That's not for a few more weeks.
Okay.
That'll roll around eventually. I kind of like the idea of doing Fruitvale Station for the podcast.
Yeah, Fruitvale Station, yeah. Would you want to pair that with Creed, or have you already seen that?
I've seen Creed. I'm not sure that would be a super fruitful conversation. I think we could pair Fruitvale Station with maybe something by another black filmmaker. We totally forgot to address Black History Month, so we may want to...
Yes, because we're uncultured. We could try... would it try a Spike Lee movie?
We could do a Spike Lee movie. I'm trying to think what we might want to do, because
25th Hour?
I might watch 25th Hour for my New York filmmakers class in a few weeks, so we may want to do something else.
I haven't seen Do the Right Thing.
We're also watching that, but maybe we could... Okay, why don't we put that off, and we can do an episode with that, because that I think would be good, and you need to see that movie.
Oh yeah. This is like Spike Lee is just a filmmaker. I just need to fucking get to.
Yeah. Let's see what else. David Mamet is someone that I've been thinking about a lot lately. If we wanted to look into some of his work.
What did you have in mind?
Well, he wrote Glengarry Glen Ross, which have you seen that?
I don't know. I don't think I have.
Okay, that's a movie I've been meaning to watch for ages, so I feel like I should jump on that.
Okay.
He didn't direct that, but it was based on his play, and then he wrote the screenplay.
Okay.
And then he's directed a few movies. He did this comedy with Philip Seymour Hoffman that was called State and Maine. It was like about like a production of a film, and apparently that is very good.
You're just kind of guiding me through this because this is a world I am not familiar with.
Okay. Yeah, Mamet is known. He's a well-known playwright. He's known for his like incisive dialogue. He's kind of like Sorkin, but like more acidic, I think. I'm sure you've experienced Glengarry Glen Ross in some way. That has the famous Alec Baldwin "Always Be Closing" speech.
Yeah. So do you want to do Glengarry Glen Ross, or do you want to do State and Maine?
Well, we can do. If we're picking one, I'd prefer to do Glengarry Glen Ross.
Okay.
And then we could...
Because like, well, do we want to like push like Ryan Coogler like Fruitvale Station down the way? Or...
Yeah, I think we should pairing that with a Spike Lee movie. I think would be good.
Okay.
We could also do State and Maine, or we could do something else. We could do another Lubitsch movie, actually.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
Let's see. He had Trouble in Paradise. He had Design for Living.
Is that a movie? The Smiling Lieutenant.
Ooh, it's a musical. Interesting.
Yeah.
Pre-code.
It is pre-code.
It is pre-code. Well, the Smiling Lieutenant just kind of looks like everything. Up my alley.
Okay, so we'll do Glengarry Glen Ross and Lubitsch's The Smiling Lieutenant.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, alrighty then. Another pairing for the ages here. We will be back next time with Glengarry Glen Ross and The Smiling Lieutenant. This will be interesting, if nothing else.
Yeah, we don't see too many like early 30s films.
Yeah, that's true.
Or 30s films in general.
Yeah. That's a well I need to explore more deeply. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us once again, and we will see you next time.
But what can you do?
Yeah, what can you do?
Expect better from my like $200 blockbusters, $200 million blockbusters.